Hello everybody, I'm going to do a turkey broadhead review. I'm going to show the different types of broadheads, and I'm mainly going to be focusing on mechanical broadheads because I can face it, if you had a chance to shoot something like that through a turkey and maybe you make a bad hit, maybe you hit him low and hit him in the leg, how much damage is that going to do compared to this right here? I mean, there's no comparison. With a compound bow, I recommend shooting the mechanical. There's all different types. I'm going to look at several different types and how they're going to react on a turkey. Most of these heads are designed for deer where you're hitting a pretty decent dent surface on the outside. With turkeys, you got to go through some feathers first, which sometimes can be dense, sometimes not so much. And this is the Rocket's Meat Seeker, and it is a plunger type head where the tip, resistance on the tip, opens the blades. They reach a certain point and they lock. They've got to open up enough to maybe kick this band off, and the resistance up front makes them open up and then they lock. Well, I'm thinking with this head, it's going to get in feathers and it's not going to ever reach its potential. At some point it may open up and lock, but the chances are you could have some failure there. There's a decent amount of chance of failure. Plus, it's not that big anyway. I'm going to roll the rubber band off. I'm going to open it up to the locking position. It's not terribly big. It's a risk of failure. So I'm going to rule that one out as a real good turkey head. Now here you got Tim Knight's bipolar head. Now it's pretty much foolproof as all the ones that open on impact, because it's going to have either a shear pin back here or a rubber band up here, and as soon as it hits, it's going to open up. It's got two solid blades, and I'm not going to say in case it don't open up, it's got two solid blades, because it's going to open. It's a pretty good size head, real good choice if you're going to be out there shooting anything from bear to deer to hogs and turkeys. It's a darn good head for everything. Is it the absolute best turkey head? No, it's not, because it's just not the size I like. I've almost come to the point of begging him to make a much longer ferrule and much wider blades. Keep the same fixed blades, but go much wider, like 3 inches wide. It would be a dang hard head for me not to shoot if he would do that, but he hadn't done that. And may have no plans of doing that. That's his company. He can do what he wants to with it. Here I have, this was a swacker before it was called a swacker. I can't remember what they called them before swacker took over. My dad shot a turkey last year with this head right here, and it hit him in the wing, and he's not shooting a terrible lot of poundage, but it bounced out. The turkey didn't even know what happened. He thought a Jake had hit him. He went over there and was kind of tried to whoop up on the Jake. What happens with these heads, they're not a front deploy head, and they're not a complete rear, they're in the middle. So they still have to, they have to cut their way in with these right here, and I guess they hung up on the primary feathers when he hit it. And I just don't like these heads that deploy in this manner for turkeys, because they get binded up into the feathers. They're not sharpened on the back side, so they're trying to open so fast that the back side of the blade up here is bind in feathers. It can't open as rapidly as this part down here is telling it to open. And it just makes for poor penetration. Not to mention, I mean, one blade's broken on this, not to mention it is quite small compared to some of these other mechanicals. We're going to look at another different type head, and what makes this head different, it's a Spitfire, a Thunderhead Spitfire, and its blades open on resistance. It don't have bands. Some people like that. I hated it. It was terrible. When I shoved these things into my quiver, they would deploy as I shoved them up into my quiver, the type quiver I had, so they would be deployed a little bit. So every time I took them out of my quiver, I had to check them and make sure they wasn't already started deploying. But one time I didn't, It undoubtedly had already come out a little bit. When I shot it, one of them came out and it sort of spiraled its way through by the turkey and didn't hit him. I like the bands that hold the blade shut. That method is foolproof. The only way they fail is if you're fool enough not to keep an eye on the bands or replace them every other year or so, or even every year. They're real cheap. All right, this is a Vortex. Correction. This is a China-made cheap version of the Vortex. It's got a cut-on contact tip. That's the only thing that makes it different from the Vortex. I shot Vortexes for probably 10 years. Killed over 100 turkeys with them. They are terribly hard to beat. Now this one can be beat because the blades are made out of pie crust. They actually break pretty easy because it's a cheap China-made knockoff. You see, they get 2 3/4 inch wide, and they have the acute blade angles when they're open. And what's so nice about blade angles that's real acute is they don't slide around bone. They hack their way through bone, they chop their way, they break bone. And when you break bone structure on a turkey, we're talking thighs, the upper part of the legs where you're going through bone structure, you're breaking them down, you're going on into the vitals with a huge cut. It's just a terrible, terrible recipe for turkeys. And I've had the Vortex, not this head, but the Vortex. I've actually hit turkeys right on top of the back where it was a clear miss, and one of these blades hang, open up, deploy, and slice a gash in his back that deep and end up getting a turkey on what essentially was a miss. So I don't recommend these because there's a cheap China-made knockoff with blades. I could probably snap this blade right here in front of you. They're just nothing to them. But anyway, get yourself some real Vortexes if you like that design. Alright, here's another design. This is a Hyper Shock, and I do not like this design for the same reason as the Swacker. Now, it's designed to wear the rubber band right at the rear, and what happens when this thing penetrates, it actually gets inside, which that part I like, but when the feathers hang, say some tough wing feathers, this is not sharpened, only say 1/4 inch moving forward opens this up about 1 inch on each side, and it can open it up because it's not sharpened on the back side. So what you got is a binding effect, the feathers and flesh holding this together, and this wanting to open it up at the rear, and it's not sharpened. So it's just really a poor design, and that this should have been sharpened at the least. Now what I do with these heads is I wear the O-ring up to the front like that, and I want them blades open. They're gonna, the spinning of the arrow is gonna have them open that much, and they're gonna open more like the Vortex does at the front. And what's so nice about that is if you do, like I said, shoot high and it catches on those feathers and deploys, it's going to roll that O-ring back and deploy, and it's going to cut that spine in two. But would much rather shoot the Vortex than that Hyper Shock. Now getting into some of the really good broadheads for turkey. This right here is who makes it? It's the Just Nasty. I can't remember the company that makes it. I might have to look that up. It is basically a Vortex design exactly. It's a copycat of the Vortex. Only they made the thing huge, just like 3 3/4 inches wide or something like that. It's a monster. And I've already killed a turkey with this head. The ferrule stayed straight. One of the blades was bent down a little bit and was a little bit crooked. I hammered the blade back out, got the head back in perfect condition. The way you do that, it actually had bent down into the ferrule on one side because these blades overlap like this. If it goes down in the ferrule on this side, you simply swap the blades and put them back in like that, and it'll be back up like so. So you get a couple of good chances with a ferrule, And even so, it's still a pretty good head, even if they do get bent and sloped down a little bit. Real acute blade angles, really a devastating head. The good thing about this head is they still make it. It's still on the market, so it's available to you. It's one I'd recommend. All right, we got another one here that I've been shooting for about the last 10 years. It's the Rockets Turkey Tomahawk. Now this head is, you have to be careful with this head. Make sure it's legal, because some places they recommend a little more out here as far as being open before you shoot it. You can trick it out. You can put a little washer or something to hold them open that much. I guess that would make it legal, but it's not gonna go in the turkey very far before it opens up, and it's an absolute monster. This thing is 3.5 inches wide as a 3-blade. Now what makes it so nice is the fact that it is so small going into the turkey. And what I do is I sharpen these tips. They come dull, the blade sharp, but the very tip is dull. And I guess their engineers thought, well, that will help it open quicker, which it will. But I wanted these tips sharp, because you're hitting all these primary feathers. Should you hit right here where you're hitting, you know, like 4 or 5 of them, at least with this small a head and with the tip sharp, you're going to plow right through the 1 or 2 you do hit, and the head's going to open. And I'm going to show you in a second how this head opened on a sweet gum tree, because I saved my little trophy. Right here's a head a lot of people recommend. Once again, it's a Rockets, and I'm not sure whether this is a sidewinder or I think this is the Hammerhead. It's like a 2-inch cut 3-blade. A lot of people shoot this head. I guess because it's 100 grains. A lot of people like that weight. I like that little bit of speed, and it's a decent head. It's just not big enough for my taste. Now over here we got this new head out, which I was pretty excited about as far as maybe shooting a recurve, because it's designed to kind of squeeze in and slide around bone, but it does not lock. And we got one here that's I got this one it's in the shooting position. Now what makes it open is it's got this collar back here that hangs and snags it and makes the blades open. Well, what I'm thinking is going to happen, it's going to be inside the feathers before it reaches that collar, and it's only just spring loaded. There's very little tension that springs the blade out. It's nothing physical that can make the blades go out except the spring. So when this collar pops back out, these blades are going to try to pop out, but if they're in too much resistance, which feathers are very tough, they're just going to stay, it's going to stay closed. And there's been some testing done, and the guy said he has failed to open. So that's what I think is going to happen. I mean, this picture, this is the way they advertised it, this is what sold me on it, but it's never going to be in that position because it's got too much resistance. And it only, once it gets open, if it does get open to this point, it doesn't lock. I'm going to hold the blades down. It doesn't lock until it's in that big, which is only 2 inches wide, and it's more designed to slide around bone instead of chop through bone. If it hits a bone, it's just going to fold down to this point and slide around the bone. I like a head for turkeys that chops through bone, and I was real disappointed in this head. I had it pegged to maybe be a head I shot out of my recurve, but it just wasn't designed the way I would have liked it to have been designed. I think they over-designed it. They got a little cute, and here's my favorite broadhead, the Tomahawk, which it caught this tree right before it got to the turkey, and you can see how it deploys as it enters. Now this one, you know, a lot of people talk about these over the top glancing out. This was not a direct hit. This was on the side of the tree. It was more of a glancing shot, but those blades being sharp on the tip the way they are, they just catch, and they expand, and they expand as they enter. So by the time they reach just a little bit, this is like 1 inch of penetration is all this is. Well, it's actually a little more than that, about 1.5 inches of penetration. And you can see one blade is all the way open. 2 blades is 3/4 of the way open. Another 1/2 inch, and it's going to be fully deployed at the 3.5 inch mark, which you know is plenty shallow. But you know, you get through that first initial hard part of the turkey's wing, and then it explodes open and crushes into the vitals. The downside of these heads, they do take a lot of energy to really penetrate on through. I build my arrows with 150 grains worth of inserts up front, and then that head itself weighs 150. So I really have a lot of energy up front, and I'm just devastating turkeys with that head. You also got these, you know, it's a whole nother different strategy right here. This may be the answer to my recurve problems, just because you'll have a good fixed point that just grabs your eye, those red wattles, and you got a head that that don't require a lot of energy to do the job. And I'm shooting turkeys really close from my recurve, 5 yards. The downside is the reason I haven't shot these before. So I'm hunting in Alabama, and 90% of my shots are shooting through brush like this. It's just thick here. It's rarely ever a big wide open shot for me. I mean, occasionally it is, but not like it is when I go out west in Nebraska, where the snow and the cattle keep everything really crunched down. It's like, and it's always clean shots. And I'm probably going to try one of these in Nebraska. It's not like I got to experiment with it. It's going to do the job. We've all seen, you know, what these things can do on YouTube. But the downside, you know, it's not as advertised. You can make a bad shot and nick a turkey here, there, and yonder. I mean, they're not 100% killed, but they're pretty darn close. And that might be the answer to my recurve. I really don't know what, but I know what I'm going to shoot with my compound. I'm going to shoot my tomahawks. And I guess one thing I can say that is a downside to some people with these things is they are a one and done head. You can see this one right here. It's been through a turkey, and it's folded a blade back pretty hard. The other 2 blades are folded back somewhat. It's went from being a 3.5 inch cut to about a 2 3/4 inch cut, which still makes it a monster. But the reason it folded back is because I hit the turkey in that cavity where it's really hard and everything. You hit that shell, and the broadhead kind of folds in, penetrates in. You're going to kill a turkey with anything when you hit there. It's them oddball shots where you're outside that vital cavity, where you really need that 3.5 inch cut. The cuts where you hit up in the breast, the soft breast tissue. It maintains that big cut on that soft tissue. Gut shoot one, it maintains that big cut and just annihilates them back there. It's the reason I like to shoot back a little bit on turkeys, line up with the legs, and if I air toward the rear, because it just absolutely destroys. It takes everything out back there. If you hit them in the liver, gizzard, or whatever, or even the intestines, it's a devastating head. I happened to get some before they took them off the market. But right now, as far as what's on the market, this Just Nasty, it's still on the market. It's a good head. I'm actually thinking about modifying it a little bit. I like this little tip, this little cut on contact tip on this head right here is actually something that really worked well. It seemed like it cut a hole much bigger than what it actually was. I'm thinking about mounting one of those, except making it much bigger on the tip of this Just Nasty. I'm going to go with about a 1 inch wide cut on contact tip. I can take my Dremel, cut some grooves in there, run it in, tack it in a little bit with a screw or some glue or whatever, and have an absolute massive tip out on the end of this Just Nasty. And what that'll do, in case I do hit something really solid and this head stops about the time it gets to the vital cavity, say the blades just kind of jam up against the vital cavity, I'll have that real wide 1 inch cut sticking up in the vital cavity, wiggling and whatnot and cut. I think I'll have a devastating combination. That's an option for another turkey head. A little bird told me somebody's working on a turkey head, and might get to work with them and give them some ideas. And I've got a couple of ideas of something that might work, something to cover all the bases. But anyway, that's to be seen whether that comes through. A lot of these companies don't want to make just turkey head, because it's a lot goes into making these broadheads. You know, everybody wants to kind of make a hybrid head that'll go turkey or deer. I think Tim Knight, he's close. All he's got to do is make things up a little bit bigger. You know, he'll have somebody like myself pushing them, and I get a few people to listen to me every once in a while. But anyway, that's my review on broadheads for turkey. Hope you enjoy it. Subscribe. If you got any comments or questions, just post them in the comments below. I'll get back with you. I don't get that many comments, so I'll get back with and hopefully answer everybody's questions or comments. But anyway, that's it for the TurkeyBowMaster tip broadhead turkey review.